Yeah, I'm going to take myself out of retirement from it. Well, I didn't go this year because it would be awkward, me going.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When the district wasn't splitting international travel and the superintendent goes off to Guatemala. Plus my new husband probably wouldn't have let me. You know what? But they don't always go to Ecuador, so you want to get in on that trip.
Get in on the Ecuador.
I keep waiting for Peru because that's one place I haven't gone yet.
Yes.
No,
That's the way-
Peru.
Yeah,
Did everything go okay last night? Everything go okay last night?
All right,
Yeah,
everybody.
I'll tell you. I know.
That's okay.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Very exciting day today. It is the May Curriculum Committee meeting, but also the annual instructional update. So we're really looking forward to hearing all the wonderful presentations.
Thank you, Dr. Kingsley. And today truly is a celebration. And if you think about where we were in March 2020 and where we are now, it's tremendous that we're all in the same room. And we haven't done that for a few years as a curriculum council. Having all our curriculum leaders here today is a chance for us to share our accomplishments and also our next steps, things that we're going to build on from this current year. And if you go back to the start of the year, yes, fully in person, but still wasn't quite 100% where we were pre-pandemic. We still had masks on. We had some distancing. In the elementary, we didn't necessarily have all the kids on carpets yet or in full groups. But by February 28th, we were all having the option of having masks. And certainly, we're at a place now, and I think one of the themes that came through in the document was we're using instructional strategies that we have used over time, best practices, whereas during the pandemic, we had to make adjustments. And we're back to implementing our full curriculum this year. And so it's fantastic. And, and I love the fact that we have all our schools, all our departments here, administrators, even our business director is here today, that's a first. And I think that tells you just how important and central to the work of the district the academic programs are. So here's how it's set up. That we have on the screen, we'll have just some photos as a backdrop for each department as the curriculum leader begins their brief highlights, because we want this to be interactive questions and be able to interact with the committee. And then we'll move on. Some curriculum leaders will have to step out to go to their classes, but for the most part, many will stay throughout. The report is set up where the goals are listed for this current year. These are the departmental goals, which are connected to our district goals, right? Very much aligned from individual to department to the district. You'll see accomplishments. You'll also see challenges and needs. I mean, we know that there's always improvements to be made. There's always things to be done. So nothing is whitewashed here. It's all there. If we're encountering a challenge, how are we going to address it in the coming year? And then you see our goals. So we're prepared to speak to that. And while this report is departmental, there's so much interconnectedness, SILs working with each other, cross-discipline, interdisciplinary work that I think will come through as well today. So with that, our newest SIL, Kelly Delvecchio and Carolyn Vinton are going to start with
I was going to say, can
K5
you
math.
tip your name tags just a little this way so we can, because I did notice a couple of unfamiliar
Yeah.
faces.
So what we'll do, introductions as you step up to the plate. So K5 math, Kelly Delvecchio and Carolyn Vinton.
And good morning. I'm actually going to start us off. We're doing it as a K-5 team, like we've done all year. So we're so proud of all the work that our students and our teachers have done in math this year, kindergarten through 5th grade. As we know from data nationally, math was the hardest hit academic area of this COVID season, and that our youngest learners were affected most of all. So as teachers came back this year and they were able to start implementing some of the effective math instructional practices. And they were filling in the areas they knew that needed to be built up and supported and filled in from areas that weren't quite mastered from the last 2 years. And as they began doing this, they also noticed that it wasn't just the math skills that needed to be shored up, but it was the learning skills. Because the impact of distance learning and the necessary COVID protocols had also slowed some of the learning of students, just the ability to use skills that let you learn. So teachers had to weave into their math things like how to have a learning conversation with a partner, how to confidently persevere with a problem, how to engage a great appropriate level of focus. So all of these things also have to be woven in as they're essential to mathematics and other areas. And as they were doing this, they were filling in those areas. They were consistently analyzing data from formal and informal assessments. They were differentiating. They had to adjust in ways they had never had to do before. And while doing this, they were getting used to their new addition of the curricular resource, the new Math in Focus, and learning all of the new and helpful things that were available in that. So they've really done an amazing job. We know that this will need to continue next year to get students really where we want them to be completely on track. As I look at the trends nationally, I feel like we're ahead of the game in that with our students in recovery. And we look forward to continuing to work this way. But we know that we're leaving them in a really good place as the year ends. And we're confident with where we have them now.
So I'm happy to meet you in person for the first time. Kelly Silvecchio. So I think the exciting thing I have to share is that across both WIS and Hurlbut, we've had a dedicated CIL in the building supporting our teachers, and we've had the increased support for students. So I've had the honor of being that person at Hurlbut, and I really have enjoyed the experience. All of our K-5 teachers created math goals this year. And as CILs, we worked with them all year to support the teachers. We also have worked really hard, to speak to Carolyn said, to teach math the way math is supposed to be taught. I mean, students are working together and they're communicating and they're problem solving. So it's been a tremendous shift in our instruction over the past couple of years, which has been great. In addition, we've had 2 kindergarten classes successfully pilot a new math program called Methodology, Developing Roots. And it really fills the foundation of Singapore math in a very child-centered, hands-on, developmentally appropriate way of instruction. And I look forward to sharing more of that with you at the June curriculum committee meeting. So a lot has been happening in math this year, K-5, and it's been an exciting place to be.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Thank you, and nice to meet you. I'm happy. And if you've never talked to this group before, do not be nervous. We're like the most laid back group you'll ever talk to. Meant to just be a conversation. The mathology, it's got all kinds of, would you say it has more manipulatives than the math we've been using?
So the 2 classes who have piloted the program have really been using most of the manipulatives we've already had
Okay.
from Math in Focus. There's been some pieces that we've had to supplement with, that weren't necessarily part of the program. So there hasn't been as much new. I'd say the shift in the manipulatives is that things are brought out and they stay out. So kids are constantly circling back in a more spiral way of working on skills versus taking out fractions and putting away fractions.
Right.
So there's a lot.
So it's more integrated.
It's much more, they're working on multiple skills, circling back to concepts, revisiting them. And one of the great things one of the kindergarten teachers said was, at free time or indoor recess, the kids choose to do the math games and activities that are out. So they're really enjoying them, and they're out and they're hands-on and they're always available.
And they don't know they're learning math while they're doing it. It's having fun.
They say they love math, but they
Yeah.
asked if they could do a math game
That's right.
for indoor recess, so they do.
I just wondered whether the shift meant that you were really making a shift more towards more on the side of manipulatives for that age group. It sounds like it's already been integrated.
It is very integrated with the hands. It's just really hands-on. There's not a workbook in the same fashion that Math and Focus's workbook has been, like with chapter 1 and pages to follow. More developmentally, they have what's called a ThinkPad. So there is a place for written work and documentation and to show growth, but it's not a typical workbook.
Good.
So that shift is away from kindergarten, which is really nice.
One of the things we were trying to address was pacing with Math and Focus was, would you say, it wasn't as developmentally appropriate? And that doesn't mean it went too fast. It actually was a little on the slow side, where
Right.
it took a number for a much longer period
Right.
of time than was needed.
Right, they had
So-
lessons specific to number 1 and then number 2. And methodology goes into numbers, like all numbers right
And
away.
can they advance at their own pace?
Yeah, teachers have found that they've done a lot less of needing to figure out how to differentiate than they have. They're, the students who need the reinforcement are being successful, and the kids who need the challenge are being challenged kind of organically.
Right, nobody's being held back to wait for everyone. Everyone can move at their own pace.
No, because someone could be doing the same activity with numbers through 100 while someone else is still working on numbers through 10. But they're still doing the same game and the same activity, so. Thank you.
I was just wondering if you could add a little color to what you guys are doing. Can you share some success stories or some challenges or some surprises that you experienced throughout this year? Feel what it's like to be in the classroom.
Got one, Brad?
I would say that one of the challenges has been teachers can't start a unit the way they typically have because there may be foundational skills. We have to take a couple steps back and fill the gaps and work that into keeping pacing and work that into still working with the kids who have achieved and can grasp this. So I think, teachers are we've taken a lot of time to look at chapters, what skills are missing, what we need to fill in with, how we're going to do it, how we're going to move along and keep up and make sure we cover everything. So I feel like that's been something we've worked really hard on with the teachers.
And I would say, if you take a look up at just a couple of the pictures, and even the one in the top right, which is 2 fifth graders problem solving together, those are the types of things they couldn't really do. In the last 2 years, we needed to maintain skill learning, but it was a lot harder. Children have to talk, and small children, the conversation is not going to happen like we can have one across here. They need to point, they need to touch, they need to interact. Really, and children, and John Antonetti said this well when he was here, they've got to do it, say it, and then know it. And being able to do that this year, and the students being very excited to, and I think teachers even have gotten that, when they see their students having those kind of conversations, you can almost see by the body language that they are into it. They're talking, they're focused, and that's been very refreshing. And I think that helps to offset a lot of the exhaustion teachers have. And like Kelly said, nothing is, I can just go and do what I've always done, because you don't know how it's going to go. But when you see those students just get lit up by what they're doing, that's been very rewarding for teachers and kind of offsets the exhaustion.
And I would also compliment the teachers for all the behind the scenes kind of happening seamlessly in front of the students. Like the students are doing math and it's great, and they have no idea that all the backstory. It's fun and it's exciting. It's not stressful, and teachers aren't delivering it stressfully.
Is there anything you need? Anything that's not working that you need support on? Whether it be resources or, where you're like, okay, if we could only do or have this.
It's my first time. I would love-
Well, you can ask. It doesn't necessarily mean anything, but we need to, you need to ask,
Agreed.
right?
I feel that a larger math block would be essential.
Time.
Because teachers, are often constricted with travel time and switching to lunch and recess and specials, and we had math breaks this year. So my biggest wish would be a larger math block for teachers to have that time that they need.
For the kids to get into flow.
Yeah, just live it and really be immersed in it, not hurry up.
So it's currently 50 minutes?
It's
No,
on-
less.
It's an hour.
It's an hour.
Oh, it's an hour.
Mhm.
For first and second.
And you could use an hour and a half.
I would love that.
Montessori,
Right.
right? Montessori classrooms, that you're gonna always hear me go back to Montessori because I was trained in that, but you all, the 4-hour work block, or they have flow, like 4-hour work block,
Can I have that too?
We want them to.
Yeah. There's more than 24 hours in a day. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's.
Yeah. Like, let's talk about flow.
I have a question, but Carolyn, I don't know if you have something in your wish list to give you a chance to.
No, I mean, really, we have resource-wise, we have everything we need. Time has been tricky. I mean, this year, because of getting coverage and subs, it's been hard to do some of the things we would want to do with teachers to go to the next level while students are here. But you can't get subs because, or, you can't cover classes. And that's not really, a lot of the things that we need, there aren't quite the solutions for. I mean, we are very well resourced and we're very grateful for that. And, something students need to not feel rushed. They need to not, so the time is a piece. But it's, they're getting in a good place.
I think the principals would echo that too. The
Yeah.
Substitute
Yeah.
teaching is hard to come by. People are not going into education, in terms of pool of people that are out there at the same level. But that's a problem nationally.
So the question I have is, I am a big believer in moving forward, right? But you sometimes have to look in the rearview mirror to look at things that need to be fixed or done differently. So I don't dwell on the past, but I tend to look at the past to make sure that I don't repeat the same errors. So, and I know math is probably one of the areas that the district is most closely looking at. So there's a lot of discussion about changes that are being made as a result of COVID, but the math scores were in decline prior to COVID. So my question is more along the lines of what changes or what can you take from pre-COVID? Things that might have not been done well. And we don't need to talk about what wasn't done well, but more talk about what changes are being made moving forward that you may have learned were taking place prior to COVID. Because when I see a lot of COVID, these problems were maybe exacerbated with COVID, but we were heading into this prior to COVID.
Actually, prior to COVID, K-5, we were very strong with our math scores. Our 5th grade scores the year before COVID were the second highest in the dirt. So we were really heading in a very good direction and using all of these instructional strategies.
Yeah, I guess because as the kids move forward, so I saw a couple of charts where we see the kids kind of progress in groups, right? So a child who's struggling in 6th or 7th grade math, is that, and the answer might be it's not, is that because they weren't as well prepared leaving WIS? Or is it instructional level at the middle school, which, we'll get there, but and a perfectly reasonable answer is, hey, from a K-5 perspective, we felt we did a good job. And when we get to the middle school, maybe that's the question might be more appropriate at the middle school level.
So I won't answer what happens at the middle school, but we felt that at the end, the assessments that were done at the end of 5th grade in 2019, right, were at an extremely high level with what we were working to.
And David, I think, you had raised this in our last board, or maybe 2 board meetings prior.
If nothing else, I'm consistent.
One of the things was, I thought maybe we would go back and math. There's a single page document for both math and reading that gives you a past, present, and future look on various areas where we have made shifts and why we've made shifts, kind of staying as high level as possible. I think this document may be helpful in answering that question, particularly at the middle school prior to the pandemic. We're really looking at 6th grade and fall off in 6th grade very specifically. And, you know, there are some structural issues. I think Janine, sort of as a segue into her talk at this point, you know, we made some moves in terms of the model we have for math, in terms of staffing, you know, and I think we can get into that, and I think it might help shed some light
This
on
was
your question.
excellent, by the way. This helped a lot. I really, I mean, as far as painting a picture of what changes we're making, how deliberate we're being and thoughtful, planful. Question, what is past defined as? Past meaning
Past, so think of it as,
last 4 years we've been doing this?
yeah, I'd say
or
pre-pandemic, or leading up to this school year,
leading up to this school year?
Yep.
Okay.
present, and then future is next year.
So piggybacking off of that question, what do you guys see as the role of the standardized testing in when we evaluate the curriculum? How important is it to focus on improving test scores in terms of planning for the year? What is the benefit of looking at test scores versus other things that we do in other measures? How do you see those fitting together?
Sure. So I think one of the things to remember is that we have very little people. So when they take a test on a computer, you are sometimes going to get a true picture of what they know, and sometimes you are not. So we look at those, and overall, we look at they inform us on the areas that we may have taught more or less. When we get the SBA scores back, we look at individual students, and we know we're small enough that we know every student who got every grade, and we know, we think it's accurate, do we think it's not, and it informs us individually. It also informs us, we get information back on the targets, which are the different learning areas. So if we see, for instance, third grade fractions was not as high as we would like it to be, we look at our curriculum with third grade fractions. Did we have everything in it? Did we not emphasize things enough? Are there some instructional shifts? In that way, it's very helpful. But a question needs to be, do you want those to be your goal? In which case you need to prepare students to take tests and have them do a lot of practice, or do you want them to be good math learners where you bring it in intelligently, but we want most of our time to be on them learning to do things like you saw there with the problem solving and the thinking. So when you have very small people who you don't want to tell, this is really important, in a way that makes them like, you know, you do have to take some parts with, you have to look at it intelligently and use what's good, but also know that what you see every day and students performing in the classroom and checking off standards and watching what they do is much more important, especially the smaller they get, the more important that becomes.
And in the past, just as the interventionist, we always used the NWA as a screening tool. So it was very useful to screen students because we were able to focus on the strands that we've actually had instruction on, the numbers and operations and problem solving versus geometry or measurement, which we hadn't gotten to yet. So we didn't look at the whole score. We were able to kind of pare down and look at what we've had instruction on and how is that going and where are those kids and what do we need to do differently there. So we always used it as a good screening tool as well. It's long. And the other day I was doing a survey for somewhere and I was like, how many questions is this thing? I was only on like 17, but the second graders are taking, in second through fifth, they're taking 54 questions and first graders is up to 42. So it's, you know, it's that perseverance of time and how to get them to do their best. And they're little. They're a lot littler than they were when I was here too.
Janine?
All right. Hi. So I feel like we've spent so much time talking about math this year and certainly the data and the data surrounding math. So I chose today to kind of highlight some of the professional development we've done this year with the teachers in, you know, to benefit the students at both schools. And as we transition back into a more traditional, or not traditional, a more typical classroom environment. So we began the year with CIL and teacher-led professional development on collaborative inquiry-based learning. And we emphasized the importance of allowing our students to really construct meaning out of concepts using hands-on and discovery activities. So like back again, like pre-pandemic learning, because you know, we've been on a computer for a couple of years and a lot of direct teaching. So trying to get more of those engaging activities back in. We also did some work, particularly at the high school, with assessment practices, in particular formative assessment, which has become very important this year as we kind of assess the foundational learning of our students and the progress and the growth as we moved on and kind of figured out where those gaps were. So that was some nice work early on. We followed up these sessions with a self-study of our own classrooms, which helped us develop the framework for our walkthrough protocol. And we talked about what does an ideal math classroom look like? If, you know, in our ideal world, what would we be seeing every day or over a course of days as we walk into a math classroom? And that helped us design our walkthrough protocol along with the consultation with John Antonetti. So that protocol was implemented for several months, and we visited over 100 classrooms between the two schools to make observations and really talk about what we valued and what we were seeing the students do. It was a focus on the students and not on what the teacher was doing or teaching. What are the students actually doing and engaging in during these walkthroughs? So based on what the data we collected from that, we had some really good department conversations on what we're seeing and you know, is this our ideal classroom? How can we, it's not, but how can we move in the right direction and in the direction we want to move in? We brought John back in and he did some targeted professional development with us, where he focused on really two strategies that he labeled had high effect size. So basically those are strategies that like give you the most bang for your buck, right? Move the students along in their learning. And those two strategies in particular, he worked with us on we're learning with others and identifying similarities and differences, which really complemented our focus on inquiry learning and collaborative inquiry learning really well. So it was kind of refreshing to see, oh, someone else sees the same thing. So that was nice. And he took us through a couple of specific activities that we could very easily implement across both schools. So that was a nice session that we had with him in March. To follow up with this professional development, the department also has begun reading a book called, thanks to Carolyn who recommended it, Building Thinking Classrooms in Middle School Math, not middle school math, in K-12 math. And this book stays in its very early stages. I had them, you know, I can only assign so much homework, but we've gotten through the first couple of chapters, and I actually have one teacher who's listened to the whole thing on tape during his commute. So it's actually very exciting to see teachers at both schools. A couple of teachers at both schools have embraced this and have already started trying some of these thinking activities. And we do plan to kind of get a little bit deeper into that study next year and talk a little bit more about those and make these activities part of our regular routine to help, again, complement that learning. As we look forward to next year, so we anticipate continuing to transition our classrooms back to that more collaborative, engaging environment, but also leveraging some of the strategies we learned during the pandemic, right? There's some really good educational technology out there that we've learned. So to continue to use that and integrate that. We're also excited about an opportunity to pilot some new resources in 6th grade. I'm currently doing some research on a couple of things. So we're looking at piloting some new resources and that kind of combine the benefits of that educational technology with learning math in the more engaging environment. So that's all I've got. We've got some fun pictures too. Look, we do hands-on learning in 6-12, just in case anyone's wondering. All right.
I mean, I would then propose my question to you. Same question. I can repeat it, but.
Yes. So yes, prior to the pandemic, we definitely saw a decline in our scores. So what I would say, I guess my initial reaction is we've made some structural changes, as Ken alluded to. I don't think we've had an opportunity with the last couple of years to see the effects of any of those changes. So we've made some structural changes where at the middle school, we have only 7-12 certified teachers. So which the idea is to bring a little bit more rigor into, especially the 6th grade, also to integrate some more of the hands-on manipulative learning. So yes, there was that decline. It was a couple of years prior. We made some changes, but haven't had the opportunity to see kind of the fruits of those changes, or the fruits of the labor or the changes. we've also talked a little bit this year about our resources, our math and focus resources, and whether or not that is the most appropriate resource at the middle school to be using at the middle school. Middle school students are at a different stage. Yes, hands-on learning, manipulative learning is important, but they also, especially after the last couple of years with the technology and everything, there's a lot of really good manipulative hands-on activities using technology, which I think is a little bit more developmentally appropriate for that age group. So that's what we're kind of looking into for the future to make some of those changes. So those scores were concerning prior to the pandemic. I was really excited about some of the changes we had made in 2019-20, and then I feel like we really haven't had that chance to see the effect of some of those changes. So.
And you haven't had the chance to see the effect of those changes because the pandemic happened and everyone was out of the classroom, or because, do you have any doubts about the changes themselves and their effectiveness, or is it really just that you haven't had a chance to test them out?
I don't have any doubts.
Yeah.
We haven't had a chance
Right.
to see them, right? So we
Right.
didn't have, I'm trying to remember. The first major change we made really was last year, actually. Like, we made some changes with the way we delivered the curriculum in 19-20, right? In 2019-20, not so much personnel, but in 19-20, and then we made some more changes to that last year, but I just really don't feel like we've had that opportunity.
Have legs,
yet, so,
yeah.
Yeah, so just to build on what Janine is saying there, in terms of that 712 certification, it means that the individual has a major in math. It's a math major. Someone 712 certified can also teach 6th grade. The other structural change, which is we're not going to see the effects till next year, is the 50-minute math block versus a 42-minute math block. That amount of time, it's harder to do more in-depth thinking in a shorter period. Now it's a small change, but those extra 8 minutes will help. When you think of SRBI, we put in our SRBI model last year for the first time, where we had a math intervention teacher at the middle school like we have at K-5. We didn't have that previously. So again, trying to target that 5th to 6th grade transition where we had some issues in that grade. We are, as Janine said, looking at the curriculum. Maybe at this point, we had such a great implementation of the math and focus 10 years ago when we started. New things have come on the market, and we are now at a point where we're looking to see pilot potentially a couple of things next year that make the improvements in terms of resources.
Next year meeting September 2022.
So, and we can talk more, I think, at the June meeting on that, but I think, if you look at these 4 areas, the model, the staffing, the teaching and learning, and the data and assessment, all of those things are contributing to, areas we wanted to look at and address, and we've made some changes in each of those.
So just for clarification, this, and I like to look in the rearview mirror and see what that change is. So prior to this academic year, was the middle school using non-certified 7 to 12 math teachers?
No, we had like 4-8 middle grade certified teachers, 4-8 certification. Not necessarily like going to school with a math specific degree, more like a generalized education where, with a focus on math kind of thing. So it's I guess the level of understanding of content, but the level a 712 teacher kind of knows where we're going, right? Kind of knows where those kids have to go when they get to high school, and can kind of push that rigor at the younger grades in an age appropriate way for that eventual end game when they get to 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade. Whereas a 4-8 teacher, they know where they're getting to in 8th grade.
So sort of like what we had previously were teachers who knew where the kids were coming from.
Right.
And what we have now are teachers that know where the kids are going to. So from a preparation perspective, when you have a child in 8th grade being taught by a teacher who is certified up to 12,
right,
that teacher and that student gets better prepared
right,
for what's coming at them
right,
Okay, and then my other question is, so just to, the technology side of things, sorry, Mike.
No, just Lisa wanted to.
Oh, sorry.
No, I don't want to leave that topic too quickly. I want you to understand that the 8th grade teachers were certified 712. I don't want anything being misled here. I
Okay,
think it's an important thing. The other thing, if I just can add one thing, I didn't mean to interrupt you, David, is that I think that one of the biggest things that we have learned this year is the importance of the data analytics and really getting into the weed with the data. And I'm not just talking about test scores. You know, we're talking about developing conceptual understanding with students. That's how the goals were written. There were targets of test scores, whether it be midterms at the high school, whether it be NWEA, whether it be SBAC. We always triangulate our data. That's not the only thing. And I have to say that Dr. Kwan, I so appreciate the work. And it's been so important what Dan DeVito has set up with multiplying these licenses and with also making sure that math intervention is tracked now appropriately in the student portal on PowerSchool. So I think that those are also very important strides that we made this year.
So then
But I just did want to mention about the certification because I don't want you to think that, I don't want anyone misled. Yes, there were some people that perhaps did not have that 712, but that was not the majority of the people there.
okay.
Okay.
So how do you create them those 2 data points then? Because initially what I understood actually would make sense, right? You've got educators who are certified in math 4 to 8. So what is the change then? I'm not clear.
6th grade. Yeah, it was in 6th grade.
It was in 6th grade, which is the starting piece. And the other changes is looking at the data, disaggregating data in the middle school where the tracking starts and looking at the students in that standard level class. That is huge for us and how they succeed at the high school. And we have made tremendous strides with that this year that we're really proud of. But so that's it.
And then on the technology piece.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
So I think Tabby may start asking this question, is the intent in the fall to start looking at some different ways to engage with the middle schoolers that's more technology focused, because that's where they're coming from, or when is?
There are a couple of new programs out there that have kind of come to the forefront in the last couple of years. Math and Focus, we've been doing this for 10 years. Math and Focus, and it's somewhat run its course, I would say, at the middle school level. And I did a survey of, actually, it ended up being most of the schools in Connecticut, to see kind of what people were using. And these 2 programs in particular, illustrative math and the Desmos math curriculum, which is actually based on illustrative math, came to the forefront. And they both have a combination of technology, discovery, exploratory, with concepts, activities, and like a paper, we'll call it a textbook, but a workbook or something like that curriculum. So paper and pencil curriculum along with the technology piece. So it just at a middle school level, I think that it's a little bit of a more engaging, opportunity and a little bit of a more engaging way to instruct them. And a lot of them, it's very interesting actually looking at some of these curriculums and the order in which things get done. Some of our biggest weaknesses every time as we look at standardized test scores are in geometry and statistics. And those units they actually front load those units in a lot of these, in the newer curriculums. They front load some of them and then they spiral back throughout the year. So it was kind of an interesting take, a very different take, and it kind of threw some of the teachers off when I told them that. They're like, well, what do you mean? So it's just, I think it's a nice fresh look. We're hoping in 6th grade to fully pilot one, actually both of them, but to fully pilot them. And then to maybe pick and choose a unit or 2 for 7th and 8th grade, just so that the teachers get a little bit of a taste and we can make an informed decision sometime throughout the year. And then there's a more traditional program we're also looking at too, just to kind of have that flavor as well, so that we can, traditional textbook with online resources.
In middle schools, when you start differentiating the students by level and start them on a path, how do we feel we're doing with doing that with the students? Do we feel like, you know, when you put them at a level, are we tracking them? Is there much movement beyond that? Because I know math is building each year. Are we seeing kids who are maybe late bloomers being able to go into accelerated courses based on scores you might see in a middle school level? And yeah, just in general, how are we doing those placements, and are we comfortable with that? How are our outcomes?
So we actually have not, going into sixth grade for the last 2 years, we have not, I don't want to use the word differentiate. We haven't tracked that coming into sixth grade. So this incoming sixth grade, the current fifth graders are the first ones we will go through that process with again in a couple of years, because in the last couple of years we have found that there are some sixth graders that we're really not servicing their needs because they are a lot, you know, stronger. I do think we several years ago got rid of the 3 levels in sixth and seventh grade and went to 2, so that we have only those really accelerated kids, so that we have the opportunity for the rest of the kids to do exactly that. Take a couple of years to really develop, so that when they get to 8th grade, we have more students seeing success in 8th grade algebra, right? Which is the accelerated course. So we don't have like a single accelerated course in 6th or 7th grade anymore. I think our process for identifying those kids coming into pre-algebra in 6th grade, I think it's been very solid and fast. This year, the data is a little slow to come back to us. So that process is a bit of a slowdown, but I do think that we just for familiarity purpose, because it's been a couple of years, we always consider the OLSAT score. The OLSAT score, the most current NWEA we have as far as skills go, and then we have our own problem solving assessment we've always done, and then we also look at the classroom data. Are these students always exceeding or consistently exceeding expectations in math? Because if they're not, then they probably shouldn't be double accelerated. So I think that process was always very successful. And I mean, you're at the beginning of my CIL tenure, we would see a lot of fall off from 8th into 9th grade. We would lose a lot of the kids in geometry in 8th grade, would not end up in our honors class, our honors curriculum in 9th grade, and that was an issue. And so because of that, we backtracked and we refined those practices. And then we haven't seen that as much. Our geometry students all go on to honors algebra 2 for the most part, maybe 1 or 2 exceptions a year, as opposed to like, it used to be like 50% of the kids, just to put it in perspective. So I do think that process is very good. As far as 6th and 7th grade, I think it's been really nice to give all of the kids the opportunity in just a regularly differentiated classroom where we can kind of tier some problem solving lessons. We could push some students, we can remediate for some students in a classroom, but giving everybody the opportunity to learn together, so that by come 8th grade, all students really had the opportunity to accelerate into algebra. For the students who aren't ready, that take math 8 in 8th grade, we, again, several years ago, developed a curriculum in 9th grade that pretty much just finishes the integrated algebra and geometry learning and accelerates them to 10th grade algebra 2. So I would say that most of our students first absolutely have that opportunity really through 9th grade to accelerate, whether it's in algebra. We have students that come out of that 9th grade curriculum, the accelerated algebra geometry, and move into honors algebra 2 with success. And that was kind of the idea of that. So I think our process overall, I mean, the short story, it was long-winded, but I do think our process is pretty good. It's been, it's proven to be pretty solid. I mean, I'm more concerned about the students who come into 9th grade in algebra 1 and what we're doing with those students and how we can, focus on them as they get through high school and really build their foundational skills and support them at the high school level. I think those students are the biggest concern for us right now.
If I can just add one thing, it's worth mentioning that when kids come up to the high school, we put kids where they need to be. There are 6 different levels of math they can go into based on their specific needs. And within those 6 levels, as Janine said, sometimes people think, oh, they're tracked till the end. That's not necessarily true. If someone is more, let's say, a late bloomer, if you will, or however in math, We've had kids double up. It's rare to get into calculus in senior year. We've had kids that we have encouraged to take statistics, AP statistics. They're 12th grade. I don't know what the current statistic is, Ms. Gavoni, about how many kids do 2 maths their senior year, and those aren't just the top kids. So I think that's also important to realize that, you know, math, it takes a while. But everybody needs to know that they can do math in the Weston Public Schools. They can be very successful in it and graduate and be very successful in college. And we're committed to that. 6 courses.
Okay. Thank you, Jean.
Thank you.
So I know,
I'm gonna be really quick.
K-5 science. So we're gonna go K-12 science, start with Carolyn. K-5.
Thanks, Janine.
Thank you, I'm sorry, I
No,
have to go.
So, K-5 science, you know, is very dependent on being hands-on, is working with partners, working in groups. So it's been wonderful to allow students to get back to that this year, to reopen our science labs to students again. And we were not able to go to the full depth this year of 100% content on depth because some of this learning time was needed for the core academic areas, recovery in those, you know, elementary, reading and math. But we were able this year to teach the content from every unit to every grade, even if some of it was in a compacted form. And as you see from some of those pictures, science is exciting for these little students. It engages some parts of their brains that other areas don't do as easily. For some children, it's the highlight of their day, their place to be really successful. So we look forward next year, hopefully to being 100% of all of these opportunities as time goes for all grade levels. So I'll hold it to that because I know we've talked so much about math, unless you have any questions.
Project-based learning in science that goes longer than one class at a time? I mean, are there longer projects?
So the way NGSS works, the Next Generation Science Standards, the unit starts with a phenomena. And that phenomenon, and that goes, that all the activities in the unit are feeded back to solving that phenomenon. So it's, you know, it looks very different with a kindergartner who is growing their grass in different, you know, like different scenarios than it would for a 5th grader who is, you know, doing some more sophisticated experimentation. But it is all back, each unit is based on one phenomenon that it turns back to.
I want to do a do-over. So I say that at every one of these meetings. So
I know we talked about time before. How much time are they spending by grade in science?
So that varies greatly. By 5th grade, they have a 50-minute block every day. It's a math and science block with a dedicated, you know, the teacher who specializes in math and science. Our kindergartners have a half an hour 3 times a week. Currently, that was our model for all K2 grades, was a half an hour 3 times a week, which, you know, as you see from there, presented some difficulty, needed some compacting in some areas, but we know that we needed to, and 3rd grade had a little bit of that as well with timing of units, is that this year our emphasis was getting our students back to recovery in language arts and in math. And you know, the schedule is, there's some scheduling challenges. You know, we all would like more time for everything, and it's a matter of making decisions of where those time goes. Typically, we would like, you know, a block that's longer, because if you're going to walk students to a lab and set up and clean up and be able to think about what you're doing, half an hour is difficult. But you know, that's where we were this year.
Quick question. Any indication that after years of science not being geared towards or engaging for girls, is there as much interest by the girls as there is for the boys? Is there gender observations you've made?
You know, I don't think we have tried. I've looked so much at gender in math. I don't know that I've looked at that much gender in science, but I you know, I know the last time we had our science assessment, we were pretty even.
Yeah. Okay, great.
So Jamie can probably answer what she sees when they get up to her level, but I will definitely take a look at that. It's a very interesting
In
question.
2019, we were, first time they had the assessment for NGSS, we were 1st or 2nd in the state. Correct?
We tied for first in the state before, yeah. But I did not look at the gender breakdown for that. I don't think, I might have, COVID has kind of sucked some of the memories out of my brain. To be honest. Yeah, I will go back and look. Now you have me very interested.
Thank you.
And after Jamie, we're gonna let Tracy get in here because I know she has a upcoming PPT.
Good morning. So, yeah, as Carolyn mentioned, just this opportunity to get back to a hands-on, interactive, exploratory classroom environment has just been awesomely critical and essential to really help our students get the best grasp of what the NGSS is asking of them, because all of these standards are not just content curriculum based, they're also science skills and much bigger cross-cutting concepts. So it's very, there's so many dimensions to their mastery and their learning of science. So it was very tricky last year, obviously, when we couldn't be so hands-on. So the teachers have just enthusiastically jumped back into this classroom environment where the kids are involved in designing their own experiments, performing them, figuring out everything they did wrong, maybe because they're not used to doing that, and having that chance to revise and just get dirty, right? And so much in terms of modeling, collaborating, creating, presenting to one another, debating one side versus another side in terms of different science arguments. And what we continually focus on is the curricular partners getting those experiences into assignments, into assessments, right? Getting them prepared to, okay, you did all of this learning hands-on in the classroom. It's tricky to come up with ways to actually make that part of their assignments and assessments. But, we're hoping that these experiences, in addition to our focused effort of having the students go online and do the NGSS practice questions, will all help drive our continued success on the actual NGSS exam. So that's given in 5th grade, and then again in 8th grade, and then lastly in 11th grade. So this year it's just been awesome to get back and do all of that hands-on. And honestly, we've seen a lot of the students struggling with that because they haven't done it in a year and a half, right? They really have had some gaps in their abilities and understandings and perseverance and transferring those skills that they're doing hands-on in their classroom or collaboratively and making that their own and owning it to be able to then succeed, when it counts for them individually on assessments or the project-based learning. So there's been a big focus this year of teachers coming up with ways to address that, to slow down curriculum where needed, differentiate where needed, scaffold, provide models, examples that students can then apply, to their own work that they then turn in. So much time, again, trying your best on doing experiments and hands-on things, but then having the chance to go back and revise and with a better understanding. Not just move on when you still feel too fuzzy about it, but really helping them grasp it and get the
mastery.
confidence.
Yeah.
Because then when you're doing so many, even though it's different content coming up down the road, they're gaining the main skills that they need to then be successful and make it easier next time they see it around. There's been a main focus this year of implementing a lot more formative practice questions to get the kids confident and allow them to gauge their understanding before they then have a bigger assessment. Allowing test makeups. Teachers we've really been collaborating with ways to help address any of these key struggles that we've seen in the students, and really just continually emphasizing for them these overall successful strategies that are relevant, not just in science, but in all their courses as they get back on track. And honestly, the NGSS test is still pretty new, right? They did it once. We're let's see what this test is. And then it didn't happen during the pandemic year. And then last year we gave it a shot again, ultimately with the goal of down the road, let's see the impact that this pandemic had. So it's still so fresh and new that, as more data comes in each year, we'll continue to focus on ways to help best prepare our students. But, you know, more importantly, I think, is to genuinely make them more curious and engaged in understanding the world around them, within them and around them. So, you know, it's just so fun to like see that the struggle, but then the aha moments that happen in the classroom. And so again, it's been a very tiring year because the teachers have again been excited to get back to this hands-on approach, but also they're seeing gaps that the students have. So we're really trying to address all of that and get them to be the best prepared that we can for everything they're going to see. Exciting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We hear a lot about 21st century learning and real world problem solving. What does that look like in the science
That's what it looks like.
Yeah, give any examples, you can
Right,
share
so
some kids'
So
picture.
like Carolyn said, this whole, like the NGSS is really getting the kids to tackle real world authentic problems. Like they'll see something, like this just popped into my mind in the 8th grade. It was like they had a speaker. They're like, how does a speaker work? The kids are like, well, it makes sound, but it's like, well, how does it work? So it's taking things that they see that they're familiar with and, you know, using that as a segue for them to figure out the science behind it. So, or again, problem solving, you know, environmental science obviously comes to mind. It's so super relevant in terms of what are the issues going on out there and how can we get out there and actually do something about it. So it is a total focus on bringing real world science into the classroom and having them learn the content that they need, the skills that they need, proper research methods and appropriate sources to use when they're going to find, like how critical is that nowadays to get trustworthy sources of information to support your stance. So as much as possible, it's really bringing actual real stories into the classroom for the students to be able to understand it better. Yes, it's very cool what's going on.
It culminates in the science research elective, which students in grades 10 through 12 can be a part of. And each year running, it's a consistent, about 12 students every year who are taking part in that program. And they come up with their own problem that they're trying to test and present results on.
That's often well beyond any of our capabilities. It's fascinating to listen to their presentations and their research. It's very cool.
Tracy, I know we want to get special education.
Yes,
here.
please. And I will be brief. I mean, I think for the purpose of this presentation, it's nice to hear updates from all of these different groups, because when I think about the role of special education and the role of PPS, it's really what do our staff do to support access to all of these opportunities. Like when I'm hearing about the professional development experiences in the different content areas, our special education teachers are a part of that. Our job as a department is to create individual plans that allow students to have as many of these opportunities as possible, and for these opportunities to be meaningful for them and meeting them where they are, which might be different from, you know, the grade level standards or the expectations that we're talking through today. I think my update will sound very consistent with updates that have already been shared in meetings this year. We've been focused in very specific areas as a special education PPS department. I think there's been a theme that this year has been a transition back to a lot of things. And I think I've been really transparent about the fact that we have a lot of students who are struggling with that. We have students who are struggling with that academically, and we have students who are struggling with that from a social emotional perspective. So we are absolutely seeing, I would say, an increased need for services across the district and for a variety of reasons. At the same time, I think we've introduced some very exciting new initiatives to help us to support that increase that in a lot of ways we were anticipating going into this year. And we're also seeing a pattern going into this year, and it's hard to hypothesize how much of that is due to the pandemic and how much of that is due to other factors. We've definitely discussed, so I won't go into a lot of detail today, the alternative pathways program at the high school. The SILs are here. They were an absolutely integral part of getting that program off the ground. We're extremely appreciative for their work. I think we've seen so much good happen in that program for our students. Many of you know that we made a recommendation that the academic component of that be expanded next year. And instructionally, the SILs, probably won't be the active in-person leads for that, but I feel really confident at this point that we have a sustainable structure for that, and can certainly have our other very qualified teachers be part of that process. We have been very focused, I think, on social emotional learning district-wide. Beginning of the year, we were talking about how do we support students who were voluntary distance learners last year, get them acclimated back into the building. How are we supporting students now who are managing the stressors of all aspects of their lives when they really had a much more discrete focus during the pandemic? I know we had an opportunity to talk about math. I know language arts is coming at some point this morning. That's certainly been a focus for the special education department. Again, our special education teachers are partners with our general education teachers in that process, whether it's day to day, through a co-teaching model, or just being able to talk about differentiation or meeting the needs of students in a particular class. I think that's kind of a broad look at the school year, but I'm happy to answer specific questions if you feel like I need to speak to something else that I left out.
I think Tracy's been the busiest person here on this past year, 2021, 2020. And thank you for all you've done to help make our kids feel better, in simplest terms.
It's been a team effort, I can assure you. Lots of different people working together to, again, just help students to feel connected and like they have a safe place and they want to be here. And that even if they are working through something hard, we'll get through it and often be better for it.
There was a public comment at one of our more recent board meetings about the uselessness of social emotional learning as part of the curriculum. And I just want to say that when I hear you talk and everybody, it just makes it clearer than ever that it is absolutely a waste to teach our children unless they are socially and emotionally healthy. And whatever you are all doing to contribute to that is critical. And so I just wanted to reiterate that appreciation.
Can I ask a question? I know you have to run.
That's okay.
I
gave them a heads up.
Okay, good. In that case, then. So under your challenges and needs, you talked about increased number of special education, 504 evaluation. Do you see this as a bump coming out of the pandemic that's going to flatten out, or is this a sign of the times that we're in now, which might be a much more elongated bump?
I get that question a lot. I think it's a great question. And obviously, I don't know for sure. But I'm concerned that it's likely the latter, that we're in more of a pattern. I do think that there's an immediate kind of crisis type response that leads to an increase. At the same time, though, when I think about the patterns that we're seeing with our students, particularly at the middle school and high school level, we have been back to a much more regular routine for almost a full school year. And yet, even at this point in the school year, we're seeing students who, in some cases, have made a very successful transition back, and are starting to have more difficulty now. You know, I think speaking to the social emotional concerns, I think we live in a really high stress environment. And I think everyone has had a challenging experience for the last couple of years, and that's manifesting itself in so many different ways. And I mean, I'm optimistic that at some point we'll see more of a return, but I don't feel like it's going to be immediate. And there's a lot of pressure on kids now that I don't think we recognize as often as we should. And then I'll just say, you know, to Taffy's point about the social emotional learning, just because I think it's so important. When I think about, and I think I said this to you after the last Board of Education meeting, when I think about skills that adults need on a day-to-day basis, when I think about the things that impede adults the most, it's, no offense to anyone in the room, it's usually not their math skills. It's usually not their, you know, ability to master a science concept. It's how do I plan and organize my day? How do I cope? What are the strategies that I have when I'm feeling overwhelmed? And I believe very strongly that like math and science requires some direct instruction. And I would say now more than ever, given our current context.
If there's one thing I can add, and when we talked about this at the last board meeting, and I think it was David, actually, you that had talked about it at one of the subcommittee meetings. I wasn't there, but Ken shared it with me about the importance of understanding what is the definition of social emotional learning. What does it mean? And I think that there is still some misunderstanding amongst people regarding it.
Yeah.
In the simplest of terms, look at the mission of the district. We have to support our kids so they can achieve it. Comfortable, respected, honored, and have tools for them to cope in an ever-changing world. That's it. And you know, when you kind of boil it down to that, it's who can say no to that? You know, I think that there's still some confusion about what it is and what it isn't.
Thanks, Tracy. Appreciate it. So we'll finish with the math, science, technology. I know, Jamie, you have a highlight, and maybe if you could begin with what happened with the robotics.
Yeah.
Highlight.
Our middle school, one of our middle school robotics teams made it to the world global competition.
In Milwaukee or something unromantic.
Texas.
Oh, in Texas.
So bad. What, Dallas?
I wish it was in Prague or something.
Which was last week. And they performed very well, right? Not way at the top, but certainly nowhere near the bottom. So it was very cool, and an all girls team. So that was
There you go.
And regarding technology, again, like just to echo so much of what I've said regarding science, but it's just, especially there, maybe more than science, it's been so impactful and necessary to get the kids back into hands-on designing, touching, engineering, collaborating, doing, right? I mean, imagine taking that and turning it into an online experience. And it's just so great to be back into those full learning, interactive, hands-on classrooms.
Jamie, if you just briefly highlight our 6-8 program and our 9-12
Okay.
tech program, right? Beginning with
Sure,
computer
yeah, in
science.
sixth grade, they start off all taking coding. 7th grade, it goes into a design and engineering. Pre-PLTW, it's called PLTW Gateway. PLTW means Project Lead the Way. That's our high school curriculum. So it's the 7th and 8th grade courses pretty much get them prepped up for what they'll then experience if they continue on at high school. So it's design and engineering, and then automation and robotics is in 8th grade. And so robotics is actually part of our curriculum. This crew, it's a whole separate club that those that are really into that, they can just be in the robotics clubs 6th grade through high school. So then as they come into high school, we have an intro to engineering course. We have computer integrated manufacturing. We have principles of engineering. and civil engineering and architecture are all options that are taken.
And the computer science, there's also
Okay,
4 computer
yeah,
science courses.
right. Yep, coding and computer science as well. One of the main things that we're facing as we move forward now is there's been changes to the scheduling at the middle school for the teaming model that leads to a reduction in 7th and 8th grade tech from full year to half year courses. So we're working on how to make that the best, most robust experience that we can, right? And then on top of that, the introduction to engineering course at the high school was actually revised by the PLTW program to be more rigorous, especially in terms of the math ability expectations and the problem solving tasks that the students are responsible for. So we're faced with this challenge now of kind of reduced experience at the middle school and increased rigor to the introductory course at the high school. And we've seen, again, the teachers have really had that challenge this year of how can we take this much more complex curriculum and make it approachable and enjoyable for the students. It's led us to really think about a lot of changes that we think would be effective moving forward. The key one being an engineering essentials course, even more introductory, which was a course designed by the PLTW program to say, like, do this before students come right into high school and take IED. So that's one of our key focuses, is really looking into this course, getting it implemented if possible and when possible during our high school sequence to allow students to not have so large of a gap in terms of learning and skills. Allow them to feel confident to build their skills to then be able to more successfully enjoy the other courses that we offer them. All in the works right now. Yeah.
I have a question.
You go first.
At the high school level, so this might be a little bit of a selfish question, but I'm in the IT field and we're hiring people on a regular basis. And what we're seeing, and I kind of see it globally or nationally, at least across talking to other groups of people, the vocational level.
Right.
Kids that might not necessarily move on to a 4-year college degree, more of a vocational. Does Weston today on the technology side, coding is not what it's more programming side of things, and the robotics could segue into AI. What about, is there a course or is there any demand for technology type of class in the high school level that's more hands-on, how things work, more, I'm probably not articulating correctly, but more of the hands-on, less of the coding, less of the robotics, less of the AI, more of the how things work, how do things go together?
I think there's a component of that certainly in all of the courses in the intro to engineering. They are designing things, they are looking at something and breaking it down to fully understand like all the components that go together. I know in the principles of engineering class, they're like right now, for example, they're building trusses, like they're totally understanding something like what's necessary for a bridge to be successful as a bridge.
That's in the basics.
But in computer integrated manufacturing, more like how machinery and things are used for that larger manufacturing process. There's these other courses. It's funny that you say that, because like we have the whole workshop up there that is not used as much as maybe we would like it to be. So it's a struggle of where do we give in order to implement this? There's a digital electronics course to understanding much more about circuitry and electrical workings.
Should I ask
If
because
I can add.
Yeah.
I don't know. I hear what you're asking. I don't know that there is a plan for a specific course in that area, but in the way that Jamie has explained, there are units and there are projects that incorporate those sorts of
authentic, hands-on activities of how do things work, activities, and tie in technology. I'm thinking about physics, where they're learning some coding, but that coding is directly related to the physics content. I'm thinking even outside of what we would typically consider to be a technology course. I'm thinking about music technology, where they're learning sound recording techniques and how to set up a microphone and, a recording system. I'm thinking about photography even, where they're learning the different pieces of a digital camera and how that changes how their photograph looks. So we may not necessarily be looking at specific courses that are doing that all the time, but we are looking at how we craft units to ensure that there are opportunities that are really truly authentic and that help students to make connections across disciplines.
I'm just thinking, just a long, long time ago, and Dan may be aware of this, companies like Cisco would actually partner with high schools and create like a boot camp. And I just kind of wonder, I just kind of wonder where these kids are in high school that might be more on a vocational path. Even if they go on to four-year college,
Right.
They may wind up in a more of a trade after college, and straight that they have a bachelor's degree, and that would better prepare them to potentially run that company in the
Right,
future.
yeah, right.
But where's the vocational side? I'm just curious if it's something that, if there isn't demand, it's somewhat irrelevant.
One thing I wanted to add, it's reminding me of, you will see that in like the North Public Schools, you see it in the city schools, Stanford Public Schools. They do have that program. I talked about, there's a special academy down in Norwalk where you can go to study that. And then you have like the AITE school in Stanford. The thing I think that what Julie was also getting at was, I remember when the kids went to Stanford Hospital, the architecture kids, and they saw the software that they were learning in our classes being used by the draftsmen. And they were like, oh my God, we're ready to work. Yeah, you're ready to work. And let's meet with the college and career counselor and that's where I think our step comes in, to really make sure that, you could go to our community and get an associate's degree in computer science. I was talking to someone from a city school saying, well, our kids are really prepared and they can work. They have the discrete skills as soon as they graduate high school to go to work. And I think that what we do with our college and career is very important. And I would also say that by doing that, we are not closing doors to kids thinking, oh, you can just do this. It's not about discrete skills. It's about, developing the analytical skills and like, what software do you use? I said, we're more about developing their minds than the specific software. And I'm very confident that the languages they're losing is good. So I think that it's certainly important, and it's been so embedded in those courses that we're in a good place, but it does bear continual reflection of when a student doesn't necessarily fit, what happens. And I think that that's where we're so lucky to have a college and career counselor and not just a school counselor.
And just because I can, I would add that there are co-curricular initiatives that speak to that as well.
Exactly.
When you say that vocational student who doesn't necessarily fit in, I have students that pop into my head and I think of them and how they found a place in the theater program,
Exactly.
right? In set building, and how they will find a place in the sustainable living course where they're outside with their hands in the dirt. So yes, in a lot of ways, it's about tapping into their passions and their skills, but it's also about how we extend that into something that can be a career for them in the future.
And there's
It's
been
interesting,
an
there's-
evolution. I'm sorry, there's been an evolution for technology, like we were talking about, where you could partner with Cisco or even Microsoft, where at the end of the program for the students, they'd get their MCT or their A+ or Network Plus certification. And what happened was, over the years, enrollment declined to the point where those companies no longer saw it as a value add to their marketing campaign. So what you've seen is a transition away from getting their network certifications, of their A+ certifications, more towards the manufacturing side of working with Arduino boards, let's say, to build a car or to build a rocket ship. And so it's not specifically the IT skills, but more the design, the building skills, using something like an Arduino board, or there's other types of boards that are a little bit more simplistic that students can use at a much younger age, that are kind of built in as units in classes you wouldn't even think of. And so it's been more spread out instead of focused to a specific tech course.
Maybe this is a PD question, but with technology changing as quickly as it does, how are we keeping current to make sure the languages we're teaching in schools are the ones that they're gonna
Right.
use when they go to business or to college?
Right. That's a nice thing about being a PLTW school is that we get the curriculum, the language, the updates like straight from the PLTW source. So, you know, our teachers are constantly in communication to see revisions, updates, PD offerings, things like that. So it's kind of naturally interwoven right into the specific courses that we offer. Sometimes when there is like a major revision or new instruments or versions of technology that now it's like, stop using this, we're going to transition over to this, which sorry, Ken, is usually big bucks. That's where they'll offer like PD training, immersive PD training for the teachers. A lot of times that's not necessary. It's really more, you know, information that could be sent through emails and through brochures and things like that. So that is a great aspect of being a PLTW linked school. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, thanks for being patient on this side of the room. Transition this way because my neck was starting to. So now K-5 language arts and 612 ELA.
All right, well, I'm gonna kick us off with the lower primary, and everything that we do, we're really working very hard on laying really strong foundational skills and the grounding for all of the learning that ends up happening straight through high school. This past fall provided us with a really unique situation. In the past, we would have a couple of kids that moved in from various school districts. And this year it was unlike any other year we've experienced. We had in one particular grade level, 24 kids that were not educated with us the year before.
No kidding.
And of those
In
20
kindergarten?
No, first grade.
Wow.
So they didn't have the foundational skills of kindergarten. If we had had them in kindergarten, we would have a really good basis and understanding of where those kids were and what their needs were. And almost half of them required significant intervention. 10 out of the 24 required tier 3 intervention from this get-go of the school year. So very unique situation. Our teachers were phenomenal. We had kids coming in not even at a kindergarten level, and they moved mountains to support these kids. Kindergarten we're used to, right? Kids may come to pre-K, they may not, they may come from various schools, but those 24 kids that came, some came from situations where parents decided to send them to an independent school in kindergarten. Some had daycare situations and they just didn't need daycare. Other situations were preschools that decided to add a kindergarten on, which really never taught kindergarten before.
Right.
So that in and of itself provided those preschool teachers challenges because they have never taught kindergarten before. And then some parents homeschooled. So it really ran a very diverse array of educational experiences, none that we've ever seen. This is my 31st year in education. I've never seen it like this before, ever. And our teachers really did move mountains. They're like, whatever we have to do, we will do what we have to do. I met individually with teachers. We created collaborative, individual learning plans and goals with these kids. And they grown exponentially. They're doing great. We really do need to make sure that they have those strong foundational skills. We can't just kind of condense it. You have to really spend the time building those skills and allowing the kids the time to learn and grow, but doing it in a way that's fun and really kind of embraces them. Another thing that is kind of unique to our school is that some of these kids have never stepped foot in a school before.
Yeah.
Okay, think about that. There are some kids that have never been in a school ever before in their life. So add that into, what we're talking about socially and emotionally. We really had a lot of heavy lifting to do this year. But I am very proud to be part of our school and our staff because they did an amazing job. I get emotional. academic conversations, if you're thinking about what was value added that we really had to do that was unique to this year and the kids coming back into the school, had a lot to do with teaching them academic conversations. How do you actively listen to someone speak? How do you take turns when someone is speaking and I want to be part of a conversation? How do I add on to what someone said and either agree or disagree with that in a respectful way? A lot of what we've taught our kids is, I think because, right? So there's a lot of work.
My ninth grader needs that really bad.
Send back, we'll do like
Really bad.
remediation. There's a lot of work, and those are the kind of the soft skills that people kind of don't really feel that, that they're explicitly teaching. But the conversations that kids have in school in an academic manner is very different than the conversation a mom and dad have with their kids, or that kids have with each other when they're playing. So there was a lot of really hard work that had to be done in those areas in order to teach our kids how to be able to demonstrate their thinking and demonstrate their growth and progress. And they're doing really well, which is the good part. They are doing very well.
They are. And so I will continue with that. This year was an opportunity, and it was very exciting to get back to our work, to teach the fullness of our curriculum, to have kids working together with each other in classrooms. Last summer, every summer, we sit down with all of the data, all of the information. And we look very closely at every individual student. We look at their SBA scores, we look at their benchmark data, and we correlate it. And we look at their growth and trajectory through the year. And then we present all of that to teachers in the fall, and teachers create growth targets and learning trajectories for every single one of their students across the school year. We meet periodically to talk about how are we getting kids to reach those goals? What are we doing with them? Our small group instruction, our regular curriculum, the challenges that we had at the beginning of this year. And it was interesting because it was despite the fact that we were fully back in school in March last year. Despite that, our kids really needed a lot of practice and work with reading volume, reading stamina, writing volume. Kids, and I say this shamelessly to parents every fall, kids cannot read enough in the school day to do enough reading to grow effectively. Yeah. They have to read outside of school. And during pandemic times, that was really challenging for a lot of kids and a lot of parents. So getting that back up and running, I wish Tracy were still here, because a lot of things that, like, when I talk to teachers at the beginning of the year, one of the biggest challenges seemed to be around executive functioning skills. And if you look at how the brain responds to trauma, that is what happens. We lose our executive functioning skills. The ability to know what I need to do and how I'm going to tackle it and how I'm going to do it. There was a good part of the first month of the school year that every classroom was kind of reteaching kids how to do that. And then we could get into the student discourse. We could get back to research clubs and book clubs and kids collaborating and producing this work and working together and learning all of that. So it's been really amazing. And I will echo what Andrea is saying. Our teachers worked incredibly hard every day for our students. We have more students who have made stronger progress on their benchmark assessments than we ever had, ever. We have more students who are reading above benchmark in this building than we ever have since I've been here. So the kids are reading more, they're doing that work. Our teachers, we work, one of the great things that comes with our work with Teachers College and our consultant is that they bring us a lot of research and best practices that are happening in schools. And so we were able to really look at new ways of engaging our small group work that leverages repeated practice, that teacher coaching, feedback, discourse, written response, all of that. We were able to do that work first with our special education teachers for their work inside of classrooms with students, and then with our entire staff. So that was huge and impactful. And we were able to videotape all of those model lessons that our consultant did. She allowed us graciously to videotape her. So we have that as a bank to pull from. And we were able to, because of our additional SRBI support, we were able to meet the needs of students that needed that. Most students who were brought into SRBI, most of them were exited SRBI. So that process really did its job.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we move forward. We do the same thing that we do. We're looking really closely at our data, what we need. We're moving into writing renewal of our writing curriculum. We're going to look with a fine-tooth comb at our curriculum and our data and what our students need, as we always do. But with the lens of, in our units, you know, what stays and what goes on a granular level. So not necessarily a whole unit coming out, but, you know, I like to say, like, going at it with a scalpel rather than a hatchet. We are bringing the foundations program into third grade from K2, which is going to be a huge, amazing addition in terms of our word work, decoding, spelling program in third grade. So we're excited about that. And I just, you know, I want to center the work that our teachers have done this year, because that has been just amazing. And in combination with the challenges that the past 2 years have brought, but also just, you know, everything. We do have more students with social emotional concerns. Our teachers are frontline workers when it comes to that. So balancing all of that in this environment has been a challenge, and they've done it amazingly.
Move on to 612.
Thank you, Yvonne.
Hi, I'm Jess DeBuno. I don't think we've gotten to meet in person. I know we met online, but it's nice to be together in person. And I'm really excited to talk about English grade 6-12. I think that for me, there was two, I guess, really major big things I'd love to highlight. The idea of, it's really echoing a lot of what everyone else said, but the idea of getting to see students working together. I know that those photos probably don't even look like much, but having students be in close proximity to each other, having them be able to share a screen, even to have them work on the same papers, to have them annotating together, having them do gallery walks around the classroom, really what we want this like hub of learning to be and what we want it to look like, and being able to get back to that was, I think, such a great experience this year. And really, again, though, looking at kind of what we've learned from a lot of it, and the teachers this year worked really hard on professional development on different tier 1 intervention strategies, what they're doing every single day in the classroom, assessment, differentiation, and then taking that and looking at the data. And we have just so much data. And to echo what Lisa said earlier, I think the teachers really need just amazing strides in examining the data and looking at it on an individual student basis, helping the students really, you know, grade 6-12 really make goals for themselves. I think that's something that has always been a very strong part of Weston education, is the students, you know, they know about their learning, they're involved in their own learning and setting goals. What do they need to do better? I'm currently scoring a lot of the 8th grade portfolios and reading what the students are saying about themselves and their learning that's kind of like hammered that home for me. And we really do that on team levels, you know, working with social studies at the middle school, getting together and examining students, looking at their progress, looking at, and we have so much data now on them. We have their NWEA scores where the students are also examining and making goals for themselves, and I think the best part is that they're doing it in the classroom, is that they're not just looking at what, you know, the MAP score says that, oh, this is where I should be, but making action steps. What am I going to do in order to get there? You know, what am I going to read? What types of reading am I going to do? What am I going to work at home? Because like they are recognizing that there's not enough time in the school day, that they need to put in the effort at home as well, which is really great. And having our 6th graders own their own learning like that. We've got common lit assessment that we've been doing at the 6-8 level, where that's aligned with SBA and kind of just giving more opportunities for students to transfer their skills. So they might be reading a whole class book in 8th grade, but also can they then transfer some of those skills to, say, a cold read like they would, and really making it skills-based, looking at teacher common assessments, and then also cross-curricularly looking at social studies and saying, okay, how are we seeing students perform? And I think that's been a really great focus for this year and has helped us to really move a lot of students and help the students move themselves really as well. And they should be proud. And I think a lot of them are. When I'm reading their anecdotal like reflection letters, and they're talking about how much work they put in and how they realized how it's paid off, which I think is so important. And moving forward, you know, we always want to make sure that we have as much support as possible. So moving some of that data team analysis to the high school level, you know, making some really specific support plans for some of our students using that data from the 8th grade portfolio. Now, as they move into the high school and getting all stakeholders involved, our grade 6 curriculum will be changing for ELA because it will move from the 2 blocks to the 1 block, but then at the same time being very excited about the workshop opportunity and all of that, what that offers for students and teachers and the different enrichment and things that we can get to as a result of that. 12th grade is also 12th grade standard. Like you guys know, we're going to change that. And students are really excited. I have so many students coming up to me in the sophomore grades, juniors being like, how come I can't take that? I'm like, well, you can when you're a senior, just, you know, you'll get there. But kind of making sure that we continue that and really speaking to a lot of the student interest in our courses as well. So,
Jessica, are you the 6 to 8 still or the 6 to 12?
6 to 12.
Okay, your card says 6 to 8, so I was
Oh my
like,
gosh,
wait
they
a minute.
demoted me.
No, I just wanted to make sure.
I don't
This is Jessica's first year.
No, I heard
in
you
the
talking
roles.
about 12.
Yeah, sorry.
So great, I just.
Put a doctor in front of it.
There you go.
I know.
Well, we should actually.
So let's add that.
No, I'm not gonna edit. No, I'm like
Talking photos.
No.
Can I ask you? I'm interested, and I think my colleagues are also interested in the multidisciplinary, the cross-pollinating of, you know, arts and science all across the board, right? Can you just speak to that, or anyone else speak to how and what are the opportunities to bring, particularly the high school students, into the same space? I don't know whether that ever happens. Same space to make those connections. One of the greatest teachers I ever had said, the best thing you can do is make the connection between what you're learning in you know, room 118 with what you're learning in room 120.
Yeah,
Can you talk about?
I 100%. I would love to see. That's actually one of the goals that I kind of had, was to have some more, I guess, cross-disciplinary. And I think we were doing such a great job, in particular with the writing portfolio. I will say is that I thought that that was such a great endeavor that was really pushing this, like writing across the disciplines, that all different courses were using it. The writing center teachers were going into Latin classes. And I mean, I just remember myself like going into a Latin class and talking about the same skills they were doing there and how those connect with their English class. It was the exact same skills that I actually
It's
taught.
almost easier for the little kids to do it.
Yeah.
Because they're in one room.
Yes,
and it's
it is.
all there.
You're right,
And
it happens organically.
Yeah.
At K5.
And like to see them, and I'll never forget, I had been working with this AP Lang class for the entire year about analyzing rhetoric, and then I went into the Latin class and they were doing exactly that. And I was like, wait, you guys, we just did that 40 minutes ago in our class. And they were all like, oh, you know, and helping them to see those connections, I think is really, really important. One thing that I do think is going to help is the portrait of a graduate.
Yeah.
I do think that that is going to help us to see, you know, like, look, thinking critically is happening here, it's happening here, and to help connect some of those skills that they don't even realize perhaps that they're building.
I just wondered if, I mean, this is just a total stab in the dark, but I wondered if there's ever an opportunity next year or another year to be deliberate in creating that space where it's like, you know, the Connections Olympics, they call it whatever you want, where there is an all school or a high school coming together of an event where it's almost like a, you know, almost like a debate club, or, you know, how you make those connections in a deliberately organized space to say your challenge is to make those connections. And I can't conceive of what that would look like. But to be deliberate and say, this is the connection Olympics or whatever it is, and to have that kind of deliberate, you know, 3-hour session where kids are having to push themselves to think across multi-disciplines, right? Don't ever do it, fine with me. I just wondered
I
whether,
love it.
how
I
would you
love
want
it.
to.
No, and I
It
mean,
sounds a
we-
little bit like the cornerstone we used to do in
Yes.
reading when
Yeah.
they're supposed to do
Yeah.
that. But it would make it more authentic if there was no thinking time. They got the task and they had to work together with what they had, and then some kind of showcase of what they. I think
Right.
it's a good
Yeah,
idea.
so we,
I was just gonna add, if I may, I do think that points to the work on the portrait of a graduate, and I think it's continuous work through advisory that started this year. Julie's not here. Where they specifically had you talk in their advisory about what does the portrait of a graduate mean? What are the skills we're looking for? And you keep, and I see the skills in high school, not there, you keep that theme going, and then it culminates in their presentation, their essay senior year, that is then shared with underclassmen, that it becomes almost a, dare I say, way of life. And our challenge right now is also at the same time of really building that robust program at the high school, to be able to integrate it 6-12 and then eventually K-12, where we have symbols, you know, and I think I showed one of how to care for yourself. And that symbol should be used on anything K-12. It's just a little logo. And so it just becomes part of an overall continuum that we need to keep focusing on, because, you know, I see it all the time at the elementary schools. I think that their schedule affords them the opportunity to be able to do it a little bit differently. And it is happening, and the idea of the academic workshop and the strength of that program for the middle school, but to really push that continuum so that kids are talking more of that language. And I think that, you know, hats off, I think the high school made a tremendous leap forward in that work this year, and then to keep that going at scale and start implementing it in those grades. We will get there. I mean, it's got to be embedded.
Yeah, two examples. I mean, the portrait of the graduate to me seems like the kind of advice that we as adults give young people when they don't know what job to take and what job should come next and what they should do to build a career and all of that. And we sort of say, you know, you're in a vessel, you're in a boat, and you're collecting stuff. And this job, all you did was file, and it was boring as hell in the corporate sector. No offense to all those people in the corporate sector. And then you went into the nonprofit sector and you tried a little theater, and then you did this, and then you had a gap year, and then you tried this. You have all these things in the vessel, they're disconnected. But at a certain point in your life, you look down and there's a convergence of all those skills and things and experiences that you had, and it turns into this beautiful kind of manifestation of what you really want to do in the world. But you had all this vessel. And I think the high school experience is very much like that, is that you're collecting all of these things that create the portrait of the graduate in the end. And you know, and those connections need to be made as they go along. My daughter is been paired with a student to do a project in English. They have to do a short film. I'm not going to look at who's responsible for this, but it's really cool. And she is going to be Offred from The Handmaid's Tale, Offred. And he is going to be Hamlet. And they have to talk about the human condition across those literary places, which I think is just, I was like, that's incredible. That's incredible. I can't wait to hear what this becomes. And I think that that's what I was asking about across science and math. How do we pair people, and English and humanities? How do we pair people? Sorry, I'm going to go on and on, but this is just, this is why this is the most fun meeting ever, because I love it.
building on that, you know, the new teaming model at the middle school allows those 4 core area teachers to collaborate.
And language, right? And language. Like,
Well,
how do you-
language, but I'm saying the common planning time is built in.
Yeah.
We have to be more strategic about the common planning time to bring the world language teachers in, unless Dan can work his magic. But we see, you know, in 6th grade, the social studies teachers and science teachers with the Guardians of the Water Galaxy project. I think we're going to see more of that at the middle school with the common meeting time. And at the high school, we want to continue to foster that because learning is not in silos.
That's it.
It's
That's so
Yeah,
fun.
high school
cross-disciplinary.
is almost more like grade level, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
just thinking of a time in our pathway class where maybe social studies kids were learning about World War II and my chemistry kids were actually on the nuclear
Fabulous.
chemistry unit where they're learning the science behind the bombs and I actually took some resources Nick had used and used it in my courses as well. So it's really cool when you see those concepts click.
Sorry, no, I'm eating up time.
No,
Go
it's
ahead.
fine. So if we'll try to target around.
Patty's like, oh my God, can we just get to it?
I like this stuff too, Ted.
We have social studies, PE health, Liz, with performing arts, and Mercedes with world language. So
We'll be fast.
briefly on social studies K-5 and then next with 6+.
So we're happy to be able to get back to teaching our social studies curriculum. It's kind of hard talking about community and community building when you're not really together. So we've had the ability to really get back to all of our curricular areas and our units of study within social studies, and it's been fabulous to kind of be able to get back to that. One of the big things that we really work on primarily in K2 is really the concept of being accepting of each other, building a community, understanding that there are things that are about us that are the same, but things that are also about us that are different. And we need to be kind and respectful of everybody. And it really is a great opportunity to build in a lot of that social emotional learning within there and really being able to help our kids learn and grow through social studies, but it also impacts the social and emotional learning. They aren't separate from each other. They really are very integrated in that. We were able to get back to our first field trip this year, which was super exciting. We had the Weston Historical Society come in and do a presentation that we have done in the past, which is really talking about people who have been impactful within the Weston community. We really are empowering our kids to understand that they can, even at their age, make a difference in the community and the greater world, because they have the passion to do it. We as adults need to help them grow that passion and facilitate those experiences so that they replicate that straight through high school on to college and as adults in their lives. So they learn about Horace Hurlbut, and they also learn about Mort Schindel, who is the founder of Weston Woods. And so they really get to kind of see and learn about the experiences and the impact that those two people have had on the Weston community. And really, it's a fabulous experience that kind of launches our integrated social studies, ELA, reading, writing unit on biographies. So that was really great to be able to get back to that this year.
And I will echo all of that. Our third graders were able to visit the Weston Historical Society this year. It was very exciting. They loved it. It was a challenge putting it together with the buses and the distancing, and we made it work, and everyone made it work, and it was fabulous. So that was wonderful. It was, during hybrid and at the beginning of the year last year when we were working in shortened days, more often than not, it was the social studies minutes that got cut. It was tough when we have to build in a couple of mask breaks every day, social studies is not a tested subject. So it was, so this year, the fact that we could get back to all of that was really wonderful. We do there's a lot of historical learning. And so making that relevant it really needs time, and it needs togetherness, and it needs, to your point, integration. So we do have a few integrated ELA social studies units that the kids really dive into. And it was, wonderful to be able to do that again. A lot of issues in history that are relevant now, and that's important. Gaining a beginning understanding of that starts here. And it's hugely important. The state of Connecticut is in the process of revising frameworks and developing model curriculum. So before we revise or do anything more to our units as they stand, we need to wait on the state for that guidance. I know Andrea knows a little bit more about that than I do. I just know it's in development, and we await what they provide for us.
So their hope is to have the frameworks developed by June. which would then provide us opportunities to be able to look at what we're currently doing and think about what is coming next. But in talking to the Social Studies Council, they did suggest pausing any curriculum revisions until the state model curriculum comes out. It's not meant to be that that's what you have to do, but it's going to provide us with a lot more resources than we would have at our disposal right now. One of the things that they're talking about doing is for the first year, when the new curriculum comes out, is being able to partner with Mozilla, and all of the Connecticut teachers would have access to unique resources designed for the new curriculum. So it would behoove us to pause rather than get in front of it and have to revise it. So that's kind of why we're on a little pause right now, the social studies curriculum review.
Thanks for being patient.
Sure, I'm very patient.
One of your many.
Thanks, Jamie.
Yes.
Well,
Getting to the point.
as a
Thank
new,
you.
as a newborn dad, that patience is probably.
Yes. Yeah, if you saw me yawning, is because I've been up late for the last 2 months. Social studies, 6 through 12, I've written some notes, but before I get to them, I did want to come back to that conversation about cross-disciplinary work. And I do think that that will be happening more at the high school level as we see Portrait of a Graduate be implemented, because part of it is also getting students to become more sort of self-aware about what they're doing throughout their coursework and the connections that the different, projects in different courses have to each other, and the reflective piece of that students are going through, I think will produce some of those connections to themselves. But in addition, there's also a piece of greater recognition among the staff about what each department is actually doing, because each staff member is guiding students through this process. And in that process, we will come to better understand what we're doing and find the opportunities. And I think it connects to that conversation from before about 21st century skills, right? Because, there are very few things that are perfectly siloed in our sort of current world, right? Like I teach econ, and one of the things that students love talking about is cryptocurrency, which is econ, but it involves computer science and math theory at a level far beyond anything I could understand, and earth science because it has an effect on the environment with, coin mining and things like that. And, that's just one tiny example that, as we become more aware of what we're doing, I think around the campus and around the building, I do think those things will start to develop more. So anyway, in the social studies, this is really our focus is on returning to kind of any semblance of normal. For me, I think of that in 3 ways. So we're looking to give students the full span of the content, which has been challenging, of course, as the courses progress, really starting from 8th grade up, they become more and more content dense. And we tend not to shy away from that in the social studies. But, throughout the pandemic, we had to abridge certain things, cut certain things. And so getting back to full curriculum has been a big deal for us. And we've done that successfully all the way from 6 through 12. The other piece is the skill development. For our department, we really focus heavily on argumentative writing skills, developing a thesis, finding appropriate source material, using the evidence, anticipating and rebutting a counterclaim, things like that. And getting back to the source analysis, that is a discrete skill in and of itself. That is more literacy oriented, but evaluating a source for bias, reliability, applicability of the source to whatever the task is. And in terms of the middle school, we see those skills as contributing really significantly towards the students' development in their ELA goals, really. Like we hope that in the process of our nonfiction reading skill development, the students are having better outcomes in their SBA and NWEA scores as well. So that's part of what Jess was talking about with our departments trying to work together in that regard. And at the high school, our reading, our source analysis sort of skills are very heavily contributory towards like the critical reading section of the SAT, where they might get a history piece or social sciences or a politics piece, and they're answering essentially reading comprehension questions. So we do, even though we're not a quote unquote tested subject, we do believe that we support students in their literacy and writing skill development. And then finally, we want students to get back to having the full social studies experience. We want students to be able to engage in student-driven inquiry. We use an inquiry arc that is, it's very similar to the scientific inquiry arc. It's, they do research, they identify a real problem or a question, and then they continue to do research to solve it, and they produce something. Getting back to the public presentation component of that has been a challenge. That's something that's really important in our department.
Because of time or because of?
Because those were things that over the last 2 years, we couldn't really have students do public presentations in the way we normally would. And so coming back into that, there is a significant skill gap. And there's also, going back to Tracy, we're seeing a level of anxiety around public presentation among students that we've never seen before. And so we are, really, my teachers are really working hard to try to address those things. And that might take time, that for some of these students, some of these anxieties have been debilitating for some of them. And so we're trying to support them in that. We're getting back to, students. You can see in the top right there, those students were just having a UN simulation. So they had a security council, a mock security council in the 10th grade. And something as simple as putting desks around in a circle was literally something we couldn't do until recently. So, those things seem small, but getting them back to that feeling of like true studenthood, we feel we have a very interactive type of curriculum. It is in and of itself cross-curricular because we have everything from econ to gov to psychology to, to actual true history. And so, we want to support the skills, but we also want to give students that social studies experience that we feel like we can finally do again.
Thank you so much. Have you seen a big change in the way current events and civil discord is like affecting the classrooms? And if so, how are teachers managing that?
Are you asking in relation to like
students bringing in things that they've read in the paper that
Sure.
they're maybe hot button issues that they want to discuss in the classrooms,
Yeah.
and you have tenor of tone of talking about that, what's allowed to be talked about or what's permitted in the classroom, and how teachers manage that?
Sure, that is a great question. I have seen in my own classroom and just from talking to the teachers in the department, there's a greater engagement coming back into the school building with students bringing in things that they're seeing in the news or more likely reading on social media or hearing people talk about, like their friends talk about or their family talk about. I think students might have realized during the last 2 years that there was a venue that existed for them that they didn't fully appreciate until they got to come back and re-exercise it.
Meaning in-person
discussion with peers, and part of it is that it's facilitated by an adult who is, really there to be a facilitator rather than to proselytize in any sort of way. So we try to avoid, coming into these discussions with any sort of, predisposition. But it takes planning. Usually I'll have, a teacher or, come to me and say, student brought up this topic. I think it would be really interesting if we discussed it. It would be a good time, you know, timely events happening. How should we approach it? And, you know, every teacher has slightly different strategies. I tend to give my students guiding questions to think about ahead of time, come in, and I kind of will moderate those guiding questions. A lot of it goes back to classroom expectations. What I have found is that staff members are really good about setting their classroom expectations, and our students here are really good at adhering to classroom expectations. So, you know, I have found that students are quite respectful of each other during times whether they're having discourse within the classroom. And to be honest, I think sometimes it's almost a better venue in some ways because, you know, you know, there are no rules when you go back and you're on like Instagram, right? And so I think like we offer the students that opportunity. We try not to avoid it. I do always sort of put in a little caveat, which is we cannot be perfectly neutral in all things at the same time, right? So like our students in the 10th grade just got finished studying the Holocaust, right? There are multiple perspectives in regard to the Holocaust, but we also can't be in the business of creating moral equivalencies where they don't exist. But that being said, you know, there are a lot of salient issues being discussed and with merit on all sides, and our staff are there to be facilitators, like I said. I hope we do that. And I would hope that if we weren't doing that well, the parents would let us know and we could make adjustments.
I think it's so important for them to be able to practice having appropriate conversations and debates in the school with a structured environment with the teacher. So when you go out into the real world, you have those skills to be able to talk respectfully about your feelings. Yeah.
I can make a connection to health with that, with a lot of the social platforms, and there's a lot more discourse that happens now that might not have happened a few years ago about current topics. So I was interested to hear what Nick said, that they handle it pretty respectfully in the classroom. I think on the health side, it's sometimes, I think what we see, especially at the high school level, is almost students challenging other students, or maybe even what the teacher is saying in regards to certain, because they have created some kind of moral opinion based on what's going on, and they're more comfortable to talk about it, which is good. But I think what you're saying, like, to create that safe environment where they can talk, but sometimes it's you trying to be as neutral as possible. And but just a note to you that I've seen an increase in students wanting to talk about certain things. And I think the lower you go down, the more the teacher may have to step in to keep it appropriate and less opinion-based and less biased, if you will.
An interesting observation, you know, kids wanting to talk more about issues, but public presentation, more of a challenge for kids at the beginning of your presentation.
Yeah.
Interesting contrast.
So one of the things that connects to is actually we're, you know, talking about this workshop model in the middle school. And one of the things we like to do is build core skills into the workshop model. And we want to keep it as engaging as possible. But, you know, one of the things that we have recognized at the high school is we need to, we have these gaps in terms of public pres. And so we would like to incorporate those skills into the workshop at the middle school level. But again, it's about defining what public presentation means in an appropriate way, because I think it's not just saying I'm going to put that slide up there and I'm going to stand 2 inches from the board and face the board and read my little thing that I wrote, right? This is a form of public presentation that we're all engaged in right now. And so that picture in the top right, that was a form of public presentation that they were engaged in, you know, and so structured debates, as well as a more traditional, which is like the top middle picture, those are some freshmen just giving a more traditional stand-up presentation, right? And so we also want to embrace that there are many different kinds of presentation, and we want students to become comfortable. It's really about communication skills. We want students to have a vast array of communication skills.
I think it's somewhat fascinating and at the same time makes sense that there's this overlap between social studies and health. I'm curious on two parts, a couple of different social studies. I would think that there would be potentially more synergy where students, we're talking about social emotional wellness, right? And we talk about it in the concept of getting the students ready to learn. And depending on the environment they're coming from in their home, their friends, Instagram, I'm curious how social studies might be evolving a little bit based more on current events rather than older events, like from a current event type of perspective of if it's evolving into that area, how do you take the social emotional wellness piece or the safety piece and encourage students who may have a perspective different than the majority or a perspective that wouldn't necessarily be initially thought was well received, but have them comfortable to discuss it so that they can, so their own mental health, right? So if they're coming into the environment stressed out or not sure about something or not comfortable, and they've seen it on Instagram, they've seen it in the hall, they've spoken to their friends, now they're in a relatively safe environment, or at least a moderated environment where a teacher can help take that student who may say, you know what, I have a viewpoint that is not mainstream or not necessarily the majority. How are we developing those kids to feel comfortable speaking about something that might not be comfortable and to some extent might just be wrong, but give them the ability to be heard? Is there, it's a current event based, right?
Whose job is that? Right? In other words, it's like, it's everyone's job, right? To help them understand how to moderate and present respectfully and tackle hot button issues. But sorry, go ahead.
No, I think that my question is on the basis of you have an educator in the room who should be very neutral, right? Middle of the road. And part of an educator's job is to encourage students, so I believe, is to encourage students to feel comfortable. And sometimes, especially in a small district like ours, I don't remember who spoke, I think it was Kelly who spoke to the fact that we know you know my kid, you know Taffy's kid. And that's one of the great things about Weston Public Schools being so small, right? So in the classroom, how, if at all, are we trying to safely encourage a student who might not be comfortable coming forward or speaking about a topic because it's not necessarily the majority view, or maybe they just from a more of an emotional health perspective want to kind of say, without saying I saw this on TikTok or Instagram, or I hear this at home. That's kind of the basis of my question, is that to me the educator's role is to encourage students to feel comfortable, and then to some extent perhaps provide some protection, right? Because if you have a viewpoint that, I'm not talking about viewpoints that are way out of mainstream, but viewpoints that might not necessarily comfortable viewpoints. There's easy and there's comfortable.
Yeah, I sort of personally think that students need to be able to hear their voice come from like a source of legitimacy, right? So like, for example, I think it's incumbent on the teacher to voice what those maybe not majority opinions might be. So, I'm just thinking of a real kind of simple example from when I was, teaching an econ class, and I was looking at two tweets, one from a Democratic politician, one from a Republican politician, and they were both about environmental regulations, right? And so I said, okay, well, what is the perspective of each one? And so when let's say the Democrat says that the Republicans hate the environment, well, that's not really what the Republican would say. What would the Republican say? Let's look. And then, well, they would say that regulations are causing inefficiencies and prices go up, right? And so by actually having myself be the one that verbalizes that sort of dichotomy.
But also lending credibility to both sides.
Right.
Right.
I would hope that students feel like there is legitimacy there, right? And again, with that caveat of saying like, we're not taking severe moral issues like the Holocaust and trying to say, well, let's look at multiple perspectives on it. There are some things that are just, not morally equivalent, right? But in terms of things like political discourse, I believe that most of my teachers do this well. I know it's something I try to do. I try to use my position in the pulpit that I have, right, to speak the idea that may not be held by the majority of the young people in the room in order to create legitimacy for it. And I would hope that that would hopefully create a degree of comfort, that there is someone in the room, who has your back, right? I don't know how well that works. It's hard to measure how well that works. The students rarely tell us whether or not that works, but that's my hope. And I know my teachers do it. I know it's something I try to do as well.
Yeah, and that's,
Add on to that just a little bit, because I know,
Quickly, because we do need
Yeah.
to, and I want to have a hard stop here at 11:30 and give enough time for.
I think
Patty,
it
Liz,
also
and
starts with
Mercedes.
evaluating arguments, right? Like, so especially when you're looking online or you're looking on Twitter or you're looking on whatever, it's evaluating people's arguments. And I know in the 6th grade, they do focus on like flaws in arguments, so that when they do have conversations, they're based in like what we teach them is to evaluate sources and look at factual information and use that as part of what you're discussing. Because there's a lot in the world, like kids need to know how to evaluate that in the world right now, like in the world, there's a lot of fallacies and flawed arguments going on.
For that question, your response. Appreciate it, Nick. So we've focused a lot this year on reading, math, and getting back to our core curriculum. Our core curriculum also includes the visual arts, performing arts, world language, PE, and health. And I think it's really important for the board and the community to hear, because we really haven't taken much time at the larger board meetings to talk about that. To hear from our special area SILs who look K-12, right? So you have the full program K-12. So let's see who's first here. We have Mercedes.
Hi, nice to meet you. Well, I'm very happy to report we had a very productive year. Teachers are very pleased with student performance. We have continued to make small adjustments to some units, to the curriculum, but we have been able to go much more in depth in developing the skills. A particular area of focus have been the expressive skills, meaning writing and speaking in the target language. So we have been able to practice much more conversations, role plays, presentations, and I want to echo what the CILs before me had said about public presentation. That has been quite an area of focus because either we talk about middle schoolers or high schoolers, who are mostly the ones that do public presentations. They are very self-conscious, they are shy, and coming out of wearing the mask and going back to presenting in public again, it's scary. They have transitioned very well into doing that again. We have focused on soft skills, like Andrea was saying before, making eye contact with your audience, like Nick was saying before, not standing right next to the smartboard. So we've done a lot of work on that area. in the writing skills, also we have worked a lot on elaboration and transitions in their writings, and mainly in-class writings that we couldn't do so much before during the pandemic. So another big area of focus has been revising assessments. Why? Because we wanted to make sure that we are meeting students where they are, and also always taking into account their social emotional well-being. We want to make sure that they felt supported and that they didn't have to take like, oh, this scary long test, but we focused a lot on frequent formative assessments and even check-ins in class. Teachers have continued to use a lot of the digital resources to check for understanding, like Quizlet, Pear Deck, quizzes, you name them. World language teachers are very adept at using technology and to gauge student understanding and make adjustments at the moment to areas where they need to focus more. What else? Teachers have worked a lot one-on-one with students during extra help hours in supporting, their specific needs. I think I basically said, what I wanted to say, but it has been a very rewarding year. Like we all have like a lot of examples of students, who before could not do a public presentation, and per day 504 can do them individually with the teacher in private, and come to you and say, Senora, I want to do my presentation in front of the class today. So those are very rewarding experiences. And again, the other point that I wanted to emphasize that many of you have mentioned was the interdisciplinary connections. It is also very rewarding when the students come to class and they tell you, oh, I was able to talk about this CRISPR-Cas, let's say in my science class that they've been learning in their world language class, or about global challenges, or about caring for yourself, exercising, healthy habits, all things like that. So, because we not only teach the language, but we teach through the language. And so there's a lot of connections with the other disciplines.
Right. Programmatically, just want to make sure the committee is aware. We're seeing, robust enrollment in Latin. French is maintaining strong numbers when years, probably 12, 15 years ago, we had a real big dip in questioning whether French, was sustainable. We are seeing Mandarin numbers dip. And that is something we're watching closely. And I think future curriculum committee is something we should look at. It may just be a trend, a cycle. But there were years where when we initiated that program, Mandarin numbers were at a higher level, and there was much more focus. And but now I would say the number of sections, and Julie can speak to this as well, is going down. But still have the program all 4 levels.
It's in the last few years, it has been a challenge to keep seniors in world language because there are so many choices in the high school. And one of the reasons is I want to double up in math. I want to take this other elective. We have so many electives, but we are very pleased that we have been able to maintain robust numbers in Spanish, French, and Latin. But like Ken said, we are seeing a decline in Chinese.
Okay. And still doing, or have you any plans to begin the trips again? And are they only in Spanish, or are they also in other world languages? Do they have trip opportunities?
To tell you the truth, we haven't discussed much yet because we want to make sure that we are out of the pandemic.
Absolutely.
But yes, we would love to.
We did talk about a trip to social studies.
Yes,
yesterday,
I know.
Nick, Europe trip that we had done.
Wants to go to Vienna.
Chaperone. Great, thank you so much.
Kate O'Keefe, our new CIL for visual arts, was unable to be here today. You have her report. If you have questions, I can get them to her. Next, performing arts, Liz.
Hi. So this year we did a little bit of curriculum work over the course of the year. We are in renewal cycle right now. But I think what I really want to talk about is more about instruction. This year has been another challenging year for us. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer. I'm going to try really hard not to be, but trying to teach students to play instruments with a mask with a hole in it or to sing with a mask on is kind of like trying to teach them to do underwater. Like you just can't get any of that breathing, the correct breathing or any of that. So it's been really, really challenging for kids. The positive things are though that they are together in the classroom and that they are, in music classrooms in general in our schools are safe spaces and happy spaces for kids. So that piece of it I think has been important for them, especially as we're talking about social, emotional, and their well-being. I will say that even with the masking and all of the weirdness that we've been trying to do over the course of the years, we're not seeing a decline in enrollment in our ensembles. The kids are still sticking with it anyway, even with that. I did see this year our regional and all state numbers are a little bit lower than normal, which I think is to be expected. But both of those festivals were in person this year for the first time in a couple of years. Even last year, they did all Eastern virtually, and the kids who participated in that didn't even audition this year. They didn't want it. It's not the same. Right? When playing your shiny saxophone next to your friend playing their shiny saxophone. So, moving forward, I think some of the content, obviously, systemically, when we're talking about, going through the elementary schools, I think that we're missing some of that. I think we're going to bring some of that back starting next year and maybe bring in some new units as well. We didn't play recorders this year. I'm sure everybody at home is really upset about that. But we're going to, I think the plan was to bring some ukuleles in. I think we have the PTO plan to request that went through and do some of that. K5. We will bring the recorders back as well. Middle school, we're going to update some things with our 6th grade, the guitar classes. The numbers have just gotten too large. So we're going to be changing that curriculum as well going into next year. And I think overall, kind of keep plugging along. Concerts are back on. We had tonight elementary school though at the intermediate school. We had our orchestra and our first choir concert last night. I had my choir concert at the high school. It's the first time we had a concert in that space since the winter of 2019. Wow. So it was pretty cool to do that. Yeah, we're pretty stoked about that. So we're gonna keep plugging along.
Thanks, Liz.
And probably the area that this year was impacted the most still by the mask wearing, and getting back to that full curriculum is now where we're trying to get to, for next year, right? Because the masks came off February 28th. That opened up some possibilities for you to get back to more normal, but this is the area that is lagging in terms of getting back to full curriculum.
I mean, our beginning instrument players, our 5th graders the lessons are shorter because we can't have as many students in the room. And at the beginning of the year, they were playing outside. They were playing, like they were trying to, you can't teach those, embouchure and things like that with a mask on. You just can't do it. So, but we haven't seen a decrease in our numbers. So they must be getting something out of it because they're sticking with it. So
Yeah, good for you.
And last but not least.
Do I have 90 seconds?
No.
I need a little more. Okay.
It's an important area. I mean, as you know, last month at the board meeting, we were talking about, wellness and certainly This area is critical.
I'm very excited to talk about health and PE. I'll start with PE side of it. And one of our goals was to deliver the curriculum with as much fidelity as possible, back to as much normalcy as possible. And I think we did that with the exception of swimming, which we're still hoping to get some of that in towards the end of the year if we can. And some forms of dance, like our sixth graders historically would do a square dance unit. We haven't done that in a few years. So we're hoping to get back to that. I will talk a little bit about our fitness test scores. We did see a pretty sharp decline in the mile run portion of that last year. With the do I blame the pandemic for that? I think yes. There was the year. It was very difficult last year we had small groups, and then when we did get together, we kind of were doing things, but we sort of had to be spread apart. Some students were doing more fitness than usual. Some students were doing next to nothing. So the other test areas seemed pretty consistent, a little bit of a drop, but the mile run, especially the higher you go, the high school saw the biggest decrease, 8th grade. And then the other grades was a smaller decrease, but not as much. I'm happy to report for 8 anyway, significant improvement this year. We used that data, it informed us to really incorporate more moderate to vigorous physical activity at the beginning of the year. We incorporated some reflective pieces, some pre-assessments, some formative assessments along the way, which may have looked like just some questions in Google Classroom where they had to create goals and reflect on them. And we did see a really, really big increase at the middle school in the mile run. I just was this week, the high school did just perform their test, and I believe they saw a little bit of improvement, but not as much as they would have liked. And it is interesting, the higher you go, the deeper the discrepancies. So that will be an area that we look at next year. Adding on to what Nick was saying about presentation, kids being more difficult for them, we just did we're finishing up right now our first project adventure unit in 2 years. And that started out with a lot of students not being able to work together. It was like pulling teeth, and we endured it, and we just kept going. And by the end of the unit, we did see an improvement in it, but it was hard work. Very reluctant in some cases to go out of their comfort zone and to help each other. And we just kept kind of emotionally pushing them a little bit. And we incorporated some questions reflective of the skills we wanted them to be able to do at the end, like leadership skills for 8th grade and safe risk-taking for 7th grade, advocacy for 6th grade. And we're doing a survey currently as we speak, but definitely noted an improvement as the unit went along. So that's telling us that maybe we should do this earlier in the year and really try to maybe make it better, incorporate more of the reflective piece to it instead of just, Project Adventure is great, the kids get to climb, but that's not why we're doing it. It's a safe space, they're challenging themselves, and it's really powerful if they're getting out of it what we want them to get out of it. And I'm curious to see if we were to improve in that area, would that improve in the area that Nick was saying? So that was interesting when I was listening to you say. So any questions about the PE side before I move into the health side? Talking too fast, am I? Okay. All right, so health. I think that we made a lot of improvement. We're talking about social emotional learning, and we're really focusing on the DBT skills 6-12. It's kind of an introductory in grade 6 right now, where we're not even presenting it as DBT skills. 7th grade, a little bit of an introduction. 8th grade, new this year, was an extensive unit with dialectical thinking. David, you were asking the question of how do you create an environment where it's safe for someone to express their opinion, and being dialectical allows you to do that. So it's basically that 2 things can be true at the same time. And how do we use our communication skills to engage in a conversation where you are honoring, even if you don't agree with somebody else's position or what they're saying. And that can also be used within themselves, where this is what's happening with me right now, and I can do this to make the situation better.
Right.
Or to reframe it, to have a more positive thought. We're teaching them to what emotion mind is, what wise mind is, you know, what happens when we use our emotions to drive our decisions. And then, okay, that's great, but how do you not use your emotion mind? So we're using like what and how skills. What do you do to decompress, calm yourself down a little bit, observe, then participate in whatever you're doing so you can access your wise mind, make better decisions, or to reframe something so you experience less negative thoughts. You're more able to engage in a reciprocal conversation that honors the other person's point of view. So I wanted to get that in. So that's the backbone of like dialectical thinking. And if we can get our kids to think that way from 6th grade on, when they do get to, you know, the high school, you know, if teachers can use the language too, when something comes up, okay, sounds like you're using your emotion mind there, or how can you reframe this to make it, you know, more likely that you'll be able to achieve what you want to achieve. So we're getting there. We made a lot of progress, have made a lot of progress. And I think at the high school, when they go into grade 9, they're going to have a little bit better foundational skills. And I think our goal is to bring it down even lower. So we start when they get into middle school, they're coming from emotional intelligence, the EI, and then when they go up to 7th grade, 8th, because we want the kids to use it. It's not good enough right now that they can only use it in 8th grade and then going into high school. We want them to be able to use it all the way. And I've been teaching this now for 2 years, and now I'm getting more comfortable. So even from an adult perspective, it's hard. So trying to simplify it, modifying. Weston's not a district where we're just going to take worksheets and a program and do it exactly the way. So creating performance-based assessments around it, customizing it to our students, the way they're used to learning is really important, because if they're not motivated to do it, the teacher's not motivated to do it, or it's not fitting to our style, it just isn't going to work.
No.
So we're definitely getting there, and I'm proud of the progress we've made so far.
That's awesome.
Do you have any, I think I remember Dan saying, because of the change in periods at the middle school effective next year, physical education took a hit.
We changed that. That was one of the earlier iterations, but no. It's
Okay.
gonna be
It's going to be health education. I'm a little concerned about that, but, and I feel that with the extra 8 minutes per period, if we plan well, we should be able to deliver our regular curriculum.
So just to be clear,
Yeah.
so physical education is still every other day, all year. It's going from 42 minutes to 50 minutes though. Health used to be, this year's a trimester, it's going to a quarter, but also from 42 minutes to 50 minutes. So that's the change.
It's always a challenge for health because there is so much to fit in, and we have state mandates that are K-12. And there's a big push for the social emotional learning. Issues come up, surveys come out, and we see that there's a need in this area, so we're always changing. And health is one of those areas that it's definitely a working document, and we adapt to what the societal needs are and what the district needs are.
And as you know, from the last board meeting, the developmental relationship survey, drug and alcohol data gets us some information to make some adjustments over the summer, particularly at the coming into middle school. We saw, middle school numbers in terms of substance increase. That's something that's being.
And and the good news about that was we saw a lot of numbers decrease significantly, but we did identify an alcohol exposure uptick. There was a big uptick. So that's data. We'll use that, and then we'll definitely make some changes and incorporate that into our regular curriculum.
And is there, I know we talked about this earlier, but just touch one more time on it. Is there any kind of like formal communication path that essentially?
No, we
the two
don't.
of you have?
It's interesting because there was a lot of.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
our structure is, I will meet.
Lunch once a week.
There's also a counseling piece to like, I mesh really well with counseling and what their focus is. In fact, they've been doing a really good job this year at the middle school level anyway, coming into our classes and helping us teach some of these things.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, because there's like these
Yeah.
silos of interest.
Yeah, there is.
Things, but there's
Mhm.
clearly overlap.
A lot,
Absolutely.
yeah, a lot.
We have a monthly curriculum council meeting, which is all our administrators and curriculum leaders, and various topics will be addressed there. There's a program council at the high school that the high school principal leads with the high school curriculum leaders. And then at the middle school and the lower levels, you're meeting frequently with your curriculum leaders, bringing them together. But yes, some of the special areas may not have as much interactive time built in, but we've seen today where that is so beneficial. And I just want to thank all your hard work this year. This year, and working with the Sills over the years, they were pushed, they were stretched. They met the challenge this year in supporting their teachers. And I just want to say on behalf of the administration, so thankful for your work, because I know we kept asking more of you this year to get back to normal.
This was a phenomenal presentation. It's amazing how much you all do every year, and I'm so happy to have my kids in the school. So thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you.